here. Crystal clear above the night.
No, I don't think she's a saint at all, really.
Think of it as having the day off. Yeah.
Day off, brilliant. That's why I'm happy. I'm not going to do a sainthood. I don't mind. Have more saints, get more days off. And then it's a woman, so I suppose it's a good idea having a woman.
And I grew to love Brigid as a real woman. We regarded her as a real woman as well as a saint, of course.
Everyone wants to be Brigid.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Celine, and this is my first podcast. I'd love to take you along a journey to discover Saint Brigid, her myths and legends in a contemporary world. A range of different people's stories and narratives informed me of what Saint Brigid meant to them, including guest speaker Dr Niamh Wycherley, who works in the Department of Early Irish as a medieval historian specialising in early Irish church. However, this podcast does not have an exclusive theological slant. My main purpose is to entertain through an enlightened examination of Saint Brigid. On my drive home, I could see the light beams wave across the night sky from the distant hill of Allen in County Kildare. I could sense the excitement of Saint Brigid of Kildare, or Saint Brigid of Ireland, the patroness saint or mother saint of Ireland, a new celebration for her first upcoming holiday in honour of Luka Bloom, Saint Brigid's Day and the coming of spring. Feeling nervous, shy and unsure of myself, I plucked up the courage to go see what was happening in Kildare town for the first St. Brigid's holiday weekend. I knew it was a historic moment and I needed to attend. I walked towards the market square, armed with my recorder, where a number of people had already gathered.
I am not tied to war with anyone. Fair play to me. Thank you very much.
Hey, very nice to meet you. I am Maka. Well, this is my normal wear. This is Legends of Kildare. We do a virtual reality experience, so we dress up like this for medieval costume as part of the experience for customers. So
That's brilliant.
yeah,
It's really exciting here today, isn't it?
yeah, it's really nice, and all the lovely music and Luka Bloom being here. It's fantastic.
You look great.
Thanks very much.
My name is Celine. I'm doing a podcast
Yeah.
in St. Brigid. Are you doing a tour now?
So we're doing a tour, more of a walking tour around Kildare. It's not specifically on Brigid itself.
Is that okay if I
PJ would
tag
certainly,
along?
yeah, of course. But I would warn you, PJ is our guru, our
Okay.
absolute expert.
What's your name?
Leo.
Leo.
Yeah,
Okay.
so mine is just more of a general walking tour, but he's got a really good insight.
I don't know what to even expect.
And again, I won't either because you won't know what the audience. I mean, some people would be just, and some people are really enthusiastic, and
Yeah.
so it's Brigid being Brigid. Is it Brigid? Is it Brigid the goddess? Is it Brigid the saint? Who is Brigid? It's whoever you identify with, really, is what makes it.
I was driving home the other night.
Yeah.
The beams from the Hill of Allen.
Yeah, you can see
Like
it.
you can feel the
you
excitement.
can bring, that there is so much history,
Yeah.
and that's the thing, I suppose, since it started. Even just ending up for doing some stuff here, there's so much around Kildare that Cullen didn't give it any energy.
I know.
It didn't give it any appetite. And there was people I was talking to here, and they're going, there was one guy, and he was actually from here, and he says, I knew about a tenth of what you told me.
I'm the manager here in this is the Kildare Town Heritage Centre. The building is here since the 1730s. For visitors, welcome to the oldest town in Ireland. There's been a proto-urban settlement here since before St. Brigid.
Is this the oldest town in Ireland?
We say so. Nobody has contradicted us yet.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. That's interesting.
I'm Dr. Patrick Hester.
Okay, perfect. Thanks a million.
Thank you.
Thanks. We're going out to start the tour now. It starts at 11. I'm with Leo, following Leo around. I'm following you around.
I'm not sure how many. It could be 18, there could be 10. Where are you from?
Denver, Colorado, in the United States.
Oh,
Yeah.
close to home, so yeah. A neighbour, yeah. Just over the road, as we say.
Just a few hours by plane, really.
What brings you here? Are you
Brigid.
great?
Yeah.
Brilliant. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm staying at the Solis Brigid Center, so.
Oh, even better. Yeah. How's that going for you?
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Really lovely.
Yeah.
They have 3 hermitages that they have there, and they're just really bright and very comfortable.
What do you think of St. Brigid's Day and having a bank holiday for a saint?
Oh, no, it's brilliant. It's about time that they gave one to a female saint. And, we're more than happy in Kildare Town because, St. Brigid is a big thing for us in Kildare Town as well. So, no, I think it's brilliant.
What are you looking forward to today, or what are you going to do today?
Learning more about the history of the town I live in, because I do help out in the Heritage Centre, but there is a lot of things that I don't know living in the town. It's the same with my uncle who's coming on the walk too. It's something that we've been saying we'd like to do for years, but when it's on your own doorstep, you tend not to do it, and tend not to notice the things that you see every day. So that's what I'm looking forward to learn a bit more in depth about everything.
Do you know anything about St. Brigid?
Yes, I know that. I know the basic story about the laying down the cloak that she said wherever land her cloak could cover, that would be given over to her to use, and that she started her first church gathering up here in the cathedral grounds underneath an oak tree, and that she was one that looking after women who were poor and destitute, and looking after people's health. That was the main thing that she did and that she's known for.
But so as we start the beginning, while it is Brigid's Day and Brigid's weekend and all that comes to that, it's how that has influenced the town. But I'm not going to be an expert in Brigid. So if you're looking for Brigid, there's plenty of other pieces that are here. But we'll give you where the influence is. So I often begin just with this map here. You've probably seen it inside. But it's really just to give you an impression of, if we strip back where we're standing with traffic, with cars, with everything, it's very hard to think, how did the town actually begin? And the first thing about the town is, it was originally called Drumcree or Drumcraig. It was a hill of clay. Because what you can't see here, if we strip back everything, we are actually up on a hill, we're on a height, which makes it unusual in itself. The second thing that's unusual about the town is, nearly every town in Ireland would have had a river going through it. And there's no river running through here, which is not the norm of how a town, because mainly a river was the highway with the bio, it was the community part of it. But it's apparently quite close to what's called the Geel Slee, which is one of the oldest roads that are coming through. There were supposed to be 7 ancient roads that led to Tara. You know this expression, all roads lead to Tara? It's supposed to pass quite close to here. And that's one of the attractions of it. But we go back to this time of 1,500 years ago at least. We think it's one of the oldest towns simply because Brigid has been nearly the earliest documented residence of a town that we can find. And the early documentation is from Geraldus, a guy who wrote about it, but he wrote maybe 100, 150 years after her death. So what we're going to talk about is already ancient in its documentation, but this is why we feel that it's probably the oldest, if not one of the oldest towns in Ireland, is the documentation of Brigid herself. But as a town, we have to strip back and we have to think of a time where it was covered in oak, so Kildare, the Church of Oak. So there was mainly, if you're going to build somewhere, you're going to make sure at that time there's plenty of resources and material. So what are you going to start with? The place has got some pretty strong established forestry and trees, and you're going to build on the heights so you can get a view. So that's really where it started from. And we're going to bring you over Peter just to get started here. Our history about the cathedral itself. So documentation from the 12th century is when it was established. It was established by a Bishop, Ralph de Bristow, or Ralph of Bristol. And so in the 12th century is when it began as an actual established cathedral itself. But obviously the history goes way back before that. And what was very unusual at the time, it was a co-ed. There was a male monastery and a female monastery, but they were adjoining each other, but they were part of the one community. Big wall in the middle, so nothing happened, but it was very unusual at the time to actually have both sexes in one monastery area. So it's very much split down the middle. What was unusual about she being the abbess, I suppose most times it was a male-dominated piece of work. So it's very, I suppose, progressive in her own right. And then they talk about Brigid. So who is Brigid and what is Brigid? And I think most of the history that you can identify was, if you're going to start a new religion, you will gather a lot of the things that happened in an old religion. So a lot of the symbolism, a lot of the history, a lot of things that were in vogue at the time were migrated over to the Celtic church, away from the pagan side of things. So like the way they talk about the 1st of May was Imbolg, and Imbolg began the 1st of February. Automatically, you suddenly go, it's spring. And you don't know when it happened. A week ago it was dark. The ground is different, the earth is different, the life of the place. So there was a lot to saying that from Brigid's side, I think it was the beginning of spring. And what they would have used, I suppose, traditionally, would be taking the symbolism of the past to help people move over to the newer way of things. At the very beginning of it is the fire pit. So while the fire pit is a reconstruction, as far back as history can go, the nuns or the abbot are going here from early times. And they believe it would have taken place originally from pre-Brigid time. Because the one thing that we'd always identify with if you're from a cult or an area would be, as I say, fire for warmth, for comfort, for joy, for life. And the idea was that the history that the nuns, they minded the fire. It was their task to keep an eternal fire going. It never went out. And it went on for many, many centuries that the fire was kept going continuously. And it was the challenge and the joy and the work of the nuns to keep the fire going. We're told that no men could go near the fire. And we're told that one of the designs was there was a very nice thorny hedge. And if you were dressed in a tunic a certain time, certain things didn't encourage you to step over that. So there was certainly a preventative measure there. And the girls themselves, they couldn't actually physically blow on the fire. They had to use bellows. There was a very prescribed way of keeping this fire going. And it kept going for many centuries until one of our visiting bishops in the 12th century, the Bishop of London, came in, looked at this, said, to paganism, bad idea, get rid of it, and came in and instructed to put it out, quenched the fire and got rid. But as typically compliant Irish, as soon as he was gone, signed the book, gone to light himself, fire was lit again. As soon as he came back, out again, on again. And that went on and off until about the Reformation in the 16th century, where it was finally extinguished. So you can see that the intention to have the fire, the eternal flame, back down in the Brigidine side of the house.
In 1993, they brought the fire back. To there.
So down in Saint Brigid, which is a really important thing and something we should never have let go of, because you can see fire, flame, life. It brings so many evocative memories of what keeps us human and in life itself. So that was under renovation. That was what discovered is where the fire pit was. Personally, I'd love to see something here that's permanent and does reflect such extensive history. So again, remind you, look, we're up on the hill. As far as the eye can see, if you're going to build something that's protective, it was oak. So we don't have evidence. Because it was wooden, we don't have evidence of the origin, only through the annals and the history of it. It was determined that Saint Brigid and St Conowal, their remains were here, and under one of the raids, they lost the artifacts and the history of it. But again, it's recorded that they were here lying side by side in a shrine to commemorate them. So look, it's an important piece of history. It's here to show you, I suppose, that it's here and it still exists in its own right. So I'm going to bring you to the church and show you some of the pieces. One of them is, I suppose, a nice reconstruction of what it would have looked like at this day and go back at that time. But the second part of it would be then is just when they were doing the renovation, what they found when they were actually renovating, to show how old the area is. You see the shape of this? You're talking about the oil? Yeah. If they're going to throw stuff down, you have very little place to hide when they've designed it this way. So I think very clever designs. You can't quite hide under it, because no matter what direction you're at, you can be got at. So It was a very fortress. You can see originally when the reconstruction, see the steps going up around the side of it, because it would have been in the 12th, 13th century. It would have been very much under attack by the locals, who wouldn't be impressed with our new landlords coming in. So one of the years, as a defence mechanism, they would have had a full end-to-end view of protecting the church when it was, the cathedral when it was built itself. So we're just going to go in here and I can see it. So this is John, our main man, who keeps an eye on us.
Kildare Cathedral, also known as Saint Brigid's Cathedral. this is the site of Saint Brigid's Cathedral. This building was erected in 1223 because it was recognised by the Normans as one of the most important monasteries in Ireland. And the Bishop of London sent Bishop Ralph of Bristol here to build it in stone. Now, Bishop Ralph of Bristol's effigy is up on the right-hand side of the altar. Now, I will hand you over to Leo.
If you can see here, that's the original, I suppose, the etching before the start of the renovation, which gives you a good idea of what the actual, if you can get in there and have a look, that you can see what the actual church would have looked like before they actually did a full reconstruction on it. And what you're looking at there is just the work that was done at different times when they were claiming it. But the first few things that John has pointed out, and I think is very important, is on the wall, that's the original tiles that we would have come across that would have gone back to 12th or 13th century. So that's the original tiles when they did their reconstruction. So all this has been redone, but it gives you a good idea of what it looked like. The second thing, which I thought was unusual, where I have huge admiration for the look of the church, he would say that in 1890, by the time the church reconstruction was finished, it was a disappointment because they couldn't afford to finish out and plaster. Where I think this is fantastic, feel that was unfinished work at the time. So again, different trends, different style. They would have liked to actually have fully plastered as a typical style. I think this is fantastic. Yeah, I just think this is fantastic. Few little, I suppose, quirks and nuances. The second thing that under the excavations, what they believe St. Lawrence O'Toole's. It's a really interesting feature. So I'm saying is you're looking down, straight down, and on the right you can very much see the windows to the right, and the windows to the left are very much in line with the wall. To do with, our Lord on the cross. And Canterbury Cathedral has the very same design. So I thought, because I said to John, show me something nobody else knows, make it interesting for me. And I really like that. And the second thing is, if you look at I won't describe what it is, the brass going across the middle, the ball in the middle brass is again slightly to the right. It's not centre. And that's in line with, as I say, our Lord on the cross and the head going sideways. So again, it's a feature that I think is unusual. You could always point to the west end of a church. So because this is now facing the round tower, it's the round tower determined that's why
west
end of the facing.
This would be the east.
Yeah. So for that reason, that's why the original grounds that there would have been a church, even before this. This wouldn't rebuilt to Mairead. Our three saints are St. Columkill, St. Patrick, and St. Brigid. And on the old of them up on top there, you see when they put in the stained glass again at that stage, they put one for each of them. So there are three national saints. So St. Patrick, St. Brigid, and St. Columkill is on the right-hand side. Other pieces of interest up on top would have been St. Conowal and St. Brigid. And the right-hand, left-hand side, again, determining that when it was actually as a monastery or as a church prayer, the right and the left-hand side was kept quite separate. So St. Conowal's on the right, determining where, I suppose, the male part of the monastery would have been, and St. Brigid to the left. So one of the bigger families, the Koch families, they would have had a huge influence over Kildare and the cathedral at the time. And again, stealing one of John's lines, that there's a crypt outside just as we go out from the door. If we could read it, I think it is very important to say that the Medicots, he had something like 14 children. And apparently there was some question about were they all siblings of each other because of wills and inheritance and all of that. And Mrs. Medlicott very much said, I am the mother of John's children, or whatever his name, to make sure there was no argument, because it was on their tomb. There's no argument then to who owns what, I think people trying to split up the family a little. The idea of the nave, they say that somebody said before that originally when Norse came in, when the Vikings came in, they would have used their longboats turned upside down for meeting rooms, whatever. And that's basically how the idea of churches was supposed to have recreated that. So if you turn that up the other way, it's nearly like a boat. And the nave, you're in the middle of a long boat. So it's recreating that structure. And that's where I think supposedly that's where a lot of our buildings came from, that design. So it's very clever. They had a long boat turned upside down. We all stood in together and chatted away, up and went on our next direction. So can't say the truth of that, but it's yes. Again, stuff with the cells and the scriptoriums, the idea of what a cell would have looked like. So the different pieces. So this would have been, as I say, the East and the West, male versus female side of things. And I said, because it was done from oak, it's very hard to know what exactly it would have looked like. So it's the best, I suppose, impression of what it might have looked like at the time. Sorry, Liz, that's what I'm saying. There's kind of, I suppose, the cells, the idea, a recreation of what we expect that they would have looked like. So the scriptorium would have been very much for the monks to actually, I suppose, when they're doing like the equivalent of the book of Kells and they're writing up pieces. So over the period of time, different artifacts, if you're here another time, you have time to go through it. It's well worth having a look around. And these are some of the pieces that they would have found. So beginning here, I think this is the more interesting one. So nearby, the Newbridge, from the likes of Old Conowal Monastery. And during the Reformation, as I say, a lot of monasteries would have been destroyed at the time. Doing some work, they actually found this and they reconstructed it and put it back together again. And what's really interesting about this is that this Bishop Wellesley would be a descendant, or what's the opposite of descendant, a pre-descendant,
Ancestor.
An ancestor, that'll do, lovely, of the Duke of Wellington. But this, I would have considered this being a particularly vain man, from my opinion, because he actually created his own effigy, because it was done in 1500 XX. He hadn't put the date of when he was going to die. So he knew he was going to die in 1500 and something. And it's there from that time. So they've reconstructed it and they've repaid to get it put back together again. Would you be familiar with Sheila the Gig?
Yeah.
So what's very unusual, either somebody's having a laugh, the last laugh, somebody is sending a message from the past that we didn't understand, or whether it's just a done thing, but there's a Sheila the Gig here in the corner. No. And it's the most amazing that it's actually here, right on the corner. So it's a fertility symbol. It was a female parts. I can't be polite about it. It was very much a womb. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And they are a very, I would say, frightening woman. Not quite unusual creature. It's not full, a gargoyle really, but she's fully displayed open, and very prominently. There's no. It's very much her brand was to have kind of an oval in the center, which is the main focal point, really. So
we're not sure why. Some people would say it's fertility as in good luck. Other people might say, is it, or was it paganism? Or was it others, like the churches is having the last laugh? Or maybe.
I mean, it's well hidden too. If you hadn't mentioned, I wouldn't have no clue.
Courtesy of John, I said, amaze me. Show me something that people don't know. So with the many, I suppose, visitors of the past and people who came to stay, from the normal sense, the Fitzgeralds were one of the big families in Kildare. So nearly everything would revolve around the Fitzgeralds. And what's interesting about this piece that John showed me, that, and they were the main families, Fitzgeralds, and the others were Fitzeuses, and they were sort of interlinked, as I said, from that time. So basically from the Norman side onwards. The guys are just saying, just as another piece of interesting fact, that there was a Maurice Fitzgerald, and at the time of the Crusades, I suppose what would have been common enough, by going abroad, they might bring back artifacts or pieces of interest. And this guy brought back a monkey. And it was part of a fun piece to have around the castle. So whether it's Kilkee Castle, I think it might have been, but I'm bluffing because I'm not sure which castle he resided in. But it was a house fire. But the story goes that he was in a banqueting room and the monkey was making huge noise upstairs, tearing around, getting very highly excited, highly stressed, making lots of noise. And when he went up to see what it was, there was a fire in his son's room. And only the monkey warned him. They wouldn't have known that it was there. And as an ode or respect for them, on their crest, or a family crest, there's a monkey that you'll see here. And it's actually on the crest. And they've kept it ever since. And if you actually get to look it up, because I checked it out myself, it's there on, if you look up Fitzgerald's family crest, you'll actually see the monkey is still there. So very interesting that how it had such a, I suppose, a long-term effect as a respect for, as I say, the monkey that warned him. So it again makes it somewhat different. I haven't got.
Very appropriate with Saint Brigid being like, the saints that was looking after animals and stuff as well.
Absolutely. Now, I don't know whether you can see it there, but it's on the top. It's on the very top of the crest. There's a monkey. So they've kept it as a note to it. So anybody who's late over here to me, I was just saying that basically to the Fitzgeralds, I say it's here. So it's quite hard to see at times, only that, again, thankfully to John, he brought things. So lots of other pieces. There's over there, it's where you can do a plenary indulgences. So anybody from the Catholic faith and old enough to remember plenary indulgences, where if you do so many prayers over a period of time, and that's one of the earlier models of there. Up here, again, I remember the word amorai. I have to think of, say it again. Thank you, there. Look at it. Brilliant. Keep going. You're helping me here. So
It's like a pub quiz.
yeah, it's going good. You hum it and I play it, so we're a good double act. So mental morais. If you know about it, would you like to tell us about it?
Well, it's I don't know what time period this one is from, but around the Victorian.
1708 is on the wall.
Okay, 1708. Oh, yeah, it's there. The awareness of death was very present for most people until the modern age of medicine. So always aware of their mortality. And then it kind of really increased in popularity around the Victorian era. So it was there before, much before, but that image, you'll see many skulls.
Yeah.
Keeping people aware of their mortality.
So what we like to think is, it's the Iris, thank you for Skull and Cross. It's really there to say, I know from my morbid hobby of reading graveyards, tombs, inscriptions, one of these reader be prepared to meet thy maker. It's that type of idea that I too are you and you too will become me. If you read a lot of those messages in the past, that they remind you, just don't be too smug when you're reading these things. You too will be, so it's a reminder that we're all passing through. So it just is here and on the way into the church, you'll see one. Yep. We're heading back out this way, guys. You're on the other side. Well, it's described as being a promise stone. And the idea is they're told that if you put your hand through and touch your heart, and you can make a promise, the promise will come through. The alternative is as a friendship stone. If two people have had a disagreement and they put their hands through there, it'll reinforce their bonds. So if anyone's brave enough, see if you can touch your heart and see if you can, it's available to you. Hey.
So what's that mean?
So you're making a promise. Very good. Thank you. And as I said, you can see there's a number of reconstruction to try and get it to where it is, but it would have been a very difficult time. There was very little money available for in the late, after disenfranchising, there wasn't money for the churches. So it took a lot of pulling, dragging, and relying on older, I suppose, contributors who may have had a little bit of guilt money to say, time to pay up here and help us out. So under lots of pressure, I've read about just a few books that are here and in the tour's office. It took a lot to get it to the level it's at the moment. That was the biggest challenge, to finish it out. But I think it's a credit to them that they had the foresight with little money to do what they've actually achieved. It's a fantastic building. So two things then over here, just we have this Brigid's kitchen, but I think when you look at it again, John, it was more seen to be an actual, like a mortuary that was used more than Brigid's kitchen, but they call it Brigid's kitchen, but there's a tunnel or there's a cavern down below, a cool space. But one of the things that John would cite, if you're down there, apparently there's a window to one side, so it may have been on higher ground, or lower ground I should say, originally, but over the years it's been covered in. So there was what would have been a window to the right hand side on it, but it was mainly used as a mortuary in the 16th, 17th century. Cool place to keep people for a little bit longer before the full burial side of it.
Back in the square now.
So here's where we blow our own trumpet as much as we can from Kildare. So for those of you who are not failures, so the GAA, the All Ireland, the football, the first time that our coveted Sam Maguire Cup was won by Kildare. And it's the last time Kildare won in 1928. So we leave it at that.
That finished our tour at Kildare Square. That was with Leonel.
In Killarney.
Bridget. Hi.
Have you ever been inside St. Brigid's?
I've been in the round tower, but the church known, it's gorgeous, isn't it?
I am mortified. I was watching kind of like Nationwide, and they did the whole thing, and they did the St. Brigid's Church, and they did the fire pit and everything. And I actually said, I'm 56, and I said that's like a few miles away, and I've never. And Ali bought a house here, and I really have. You know, like years ago, Kildare was kind of, just Kildare, like, but now it's after really up and coming, and it's gorgeous. A lot of businesses come in, and and the Kildare, the outlets and all that. But I just said I would love to do that tour. She had it on Nationwide, and Ali said, "Ma'am, it's on at St. Brigid's weekend." So we come over, and it's fascinating, isn't it?
And your name is Bridget too, so
Bridget too. And I asked 4 kids, would any of them call their children Bridget? They said no, but then one of them said, "You know what? They might after with all the revival, so that everybody getting back holiday." Celine, I went to school with Celine.
Hi there, I went to school with Bridget White here.
Oh, very good. Well, yeah, we used to have great friends.
Seem to house here in Kildare.
No, I did, and I followed the Instagram, the heritage thing.
Yeah.
So I sent it to Mom, and she was like, "Oh, we have to go to that."
I have to go and see that too.
You have to go, you're a Bridget. I mean, come on.
Yeah, that's exactly. And you know what? I'm working in school because I work in school Reed, ironically, in Naas, and there's 700 pupils, and there's not one British, and there's 56 staff, and there's not one British. So the name Bridget is kind of gone, really.
Yeah, but it's probably going to come back now with St. Bridget.
Definitely will.
Well, I think now that the whole country has a bank holiday.
Because there's loads of Patrick's,
Yeah, loads of Patrick.
What do you think of having St. Bridget's Day as a bank holiday, especially in the New Ireland?
I think more because, it's a woman.
It's a woman,
Every other holiday, like St. Patrick's weekend, it's the man.
Yeah, they're all kind of, that's a very good point, actually. It's a lovely, strong Irish Celtic woman. Yeah, that's a good thing. But what I like about it is that it's a multicultural race, but mostly the people that come here become more Irish than the Irish themselves. They love all the traditions. Like you look at Patrick's Day, which is recognised all over the world. There's no other saint in the world that gets the same recognition as St. Patrick.
Yeah.
Right the way around to Australia, right to Singapore, China, France, every country in the world celebrates from a little island in the world St. Patrick. So you don't even know where St. Bridget's going to end up. Like we've only just started. This is the first, and I've never seen so much of St. Bridget in my life.
Yeah.
In my life, have I seen so much on Nationwide, on televisions, the newspapers, all over the country. And I said she's spread because there is, as you said, it's the fact that she's a woman. She was very strong. She loved animals, all the above. I say, she definitely will make it big. I loved it now, I had to say. But here am I, living in Kildare. My name is Bridget. I was never in the church at all.
What did you think of the cathedral today?
I thought it was absolutely amazing. And if I'm being honest, I was a little bit embarrassed that I didn't know more of the history of it, consider that we have such...
there's so much
there and such a strong connection. And I thought the church was beautiful. I actually don't even know, this is embarrassing, I actually don't even know if it's a working. Is there masses there? And is it a functioning church?
I don't know, we can ask Leo.
Yeah, that's what I'd like to ask him.
Leo, Leo, she has a question.
The questions you have, you say, I'm not asking that, sounds stupid.
No.
No. Is it a fully functioning church?
Yes, fully functioning, yes.
Really?
Yes, it's just, again, the Church of Ireland population is so small.
Yeah.
That's the challenge.
Church of Ireland.
It's Church of Ireland.
Oh, I knew that, but I didn't know.
Yeah.
That,
so, and the population's down to it's tiny.
Yeah.
So
do they have mass on a Sunday?
They have service.
Okay.
Yeah, and they have it tomorrow at 11:15, I think it is. Every Sunday, I think they have it. Yeah.
And so there's probably going to be a huge occasion for tomorrow, then, right?
Yeah. So. And I think Ian McQueen is singing tomorrow night there. So I think that'd be something. Imagine the acoustics in that. Yeah. Do you know who Ian McQueen is? I'm catching it out. Do you remember did you ever hear the voice as in the song was in one of the Eurovisions now? It's before your time. Yes. But the last time Ireland won the Eurovision, she was blonde.
She's amazing.
She's like amazing. It's almost soprano type. Do you remember Ian McQueen? She was long blonde and I Am the Voice is the song.
You know the song?
It's very, very...
melodic.
Yes.
Very melodic.
Yeah,
very
Celtic.
Very haunting and melodic. Yeah. It's gorgeous.
But she's playing here now. So that'd be...
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, that'd be really good.
It's really got a revival. This whole St. Brigid thing has really revived it.
Well, I'm amazed by the square. I think the work they put in.
Brilliant.
The following months, I attended several local events in the Kildare area and met up with artisans, musicians, nuns, sheep farmers, and many more fascinating people, all with one common interest, Saint Brigid. I attended Wool, the Legacy of Saint Brigid event in Newbridge Town Hall, to talk to people about Saint Brigid because she is the patron saint of sheep, among other things. I wanted to explore that relationship and see what Brigid meant to farmers and artisans.
So I had a conversation with Deirdre Lane, who hosted the Wool event.
Brigid herself was a lady, a healing lady, a powerful lady, reputed to be half Portuguese. Her mother was a slave. She was so beautiful in her days that many a man wanted to marry her. Apparently her father was quite keen on her too, according to legends. She shared her bed with another woman, which is really unusual to have that documented in the day. So perhaps that's another reason why she never wed. So Brigid, in her skills as a herbalist and healing woman, was sought out for people with labour problems, with also young babies. She was the goddess of babies, the goddess of children, and on Brigid Eve she flies over Ireland and blesses everybody, especially the newborns in their bed. Brigid also started an art school. She was an expert smith herself, so the smithing work on the Curragh still continues, with beautiful farrier work and horse-related work, so ironmongering and ironwork. Her generosity is renowned, including taking her father's sword, apparently the day her father was so antagonised by Brigid that he went to the king to say, please take this child off my hand. She's giving away all my goods and all my everything. The king was going, are you sure? She's the goddess of beer. She's a great smith. She's made that wonderful sword of yours. And when he went to look out for his sword, she'd taken his beautiful sword and given it away to a man in need.
Hi Natasha. What is this to do with Saint Brigid? Do you know?
I'm not too sure myself, but I believe that she was the goddess of wool.
You're a farmer?
That's right, I'm a farmer. I'm a sheep farmer in the Curragh.
What's your name?
Percy Podger.
What are you doing here, and do you know anything about Saint Brigid?
To come from the Curragh, I know about Saint Brigid because Saint Brigid's Club and all the legend, history and all the rest. Whatever about the reality.
Celine, have you met Gabhann?
No.
Community radio here in Newbridge.
Yeah, well, the Brigid Adventure will lead you down lots of roads, and it's fantastic. And I'm passionate. I have to get this bit in. I'm passionate about Conowal, who's our Newbridge saint, but he was called to Kildare by Brigid to be her first bishop of Kildare. So we have a very strong, verified link with Brigid, and the story is he crossed the plains with the Curragh in a chariot to meet Brigid. So can you imagine now, translated, it could have been just an oxen, two oxen and a cart, but in the Irish language it's translated as a chariot. So I have a vision of him with, a very intense kind of hermetic individual, a very kind of high principled person crossing the Curragh in, with long hair and flowing robes. And Brigid is this down to earth, no nonsense, can do woman. She says, well, I need someone to mind my sheep, as in my human sheep. Will you do the job? And he's like, I really want to be by the river making beautiful works of art out of metal. And she said, oh, come on, you'll do it. So he did it. That's the story. So my vision is that we walk across the Curragh every year to meet Brigid. Conowal will be behind a figure of Conowal. The kids, the old people, will just all walk across the Curragh to meet Brigid once a year in a symbolic reenactment of that meeting. And also, if you think about it, Brigid is a strong female, but she also chose a strong male. She didn't do it on her own with only women. She chose a strong male figure to work with her. So she was a very balanced individual with great foresight. It wasn't a women only. She might have been a feminist, but she understood the value of men. That's my version. I think she was very far-sighted. And she had a community of men and women, which was quite unusual as well, or not. So the medieval history side is fascinating. And there will be a conference in April. Unfortunately, you'll probably be tied up with your work, but the 22nd of April, over at Solas Frida at the Brigidine Nuns Conference Centre on Brigid, and the first speaker in the morning will be talking about Boss Brigid. Brigid is a woman of power and women in leadership. And then the afternoon is more of an environmentally focused afternoon.
So I took Siobhan's advice and I attended the conference, Brigid, Woman of Mystery, Woman of Inspiration, Saint Brigid of Kildare.
I'm Dr Niamh Wycherley. I'm a medieval historian in the Department of Early Irish in Maynooth University. And I specialise in the history of the early Irish Church.
I would love to know what you know about Saint Brigid, but you'd be here all day if I ask a general question like that. But one of the things that came to my mind is I've heard that Saint Brigid was supposed to have died at the age of 80. Would that be possible in those medieval days?
Yes, it would have been possible, certainly. However, it's really hard to take any of these statements about these early church founders and saints, and even to a lesser extent, even kings and important people. It's hard to take it as fact because they're often kind of written posthumously. What we do know is that the earliest sources claim that she was kind of around the age of 80 when she died. And that is typical for saints and early church founders because longevity of life is a kind of a testimony to a life well lived. So their holiness and virtues, would keep them alive a long time. But scientifically, yes, it was possible for people to live that long.
What sort of background did she have? Come from an affluent?
It's only really over the last year that I have tried to delve into what the real woman Brigid would have been like, because previously I've just been focused on what the later historical sources are saying about her. Okay, and that tells us more about the people who are writing about her than it does about Brigid herself. This goes for all of these early church founders. We do not have many historical sources, barely any, from the period in which they lived. So she's not unique in that. I couldn't tell you what, Kevin of Glendalough or Kieran of Clonmacnoise really would have been like. However, I think if we are to examine what kind of women or what kind of people became founders of these early churches and later became venerated as saints, she was most likely affluent. She was most likely coming from a privileged background. That is not to say that you do not have people from the lower classes in society who become famous Christians who spread the word of Christ through their, charisma, amongst other things, and gain followers in that way. So it's not impossible that she would have been someone like that. We do know that Patrick was someone who came to Ireland with very little social standing, and through the force of, I suppose his personality, he managed to convince people of the word of God. He managed to convince kings to let him walk through their jurisdiction, their kingdoms, talking about Christ. However, as a woman, that would have been almost impossible to function that way. So just based on what we know about the society at the time and what we know about how women at that time were treated and lived, it's more likely that she would have been someone from an affluent background. And in fairness, she is portrayed that way in her early sources, that her father was of noble birth. So she would have been of noble birth too. She would have had to convince someone to give her land, to build her church and that kind of thing. So it was most likely that she was well connected and that a close male relative gave her the land to found her church. But we can't really ever know what her personality was like. We just know the kind of attributes she would have needed to have had to succeed. So whether she's someone that you would have gotten on with today or not, she must have been confident. She must have been brave. She must have been strong. And she must have been very clear in her message and what she believed in to gain a following.
What comes to mind when you think of Saint Brigid? Because I find that there's a lot of confusion as to who she is. She's a Saint Anna goddess, and I never really knew that when I was going to school. I just knew she was Saint Brigid. So what exactly comes to mind when you think of Saint Brigid?
Well, now all I think of is the real woman or women like her. That's what she really means to me now. Maybe if you framed that question to me 2 years ago, I'm not sure what I would have answered, if I'm honest. I've become so exercised by the dismissal of Brigid as a real woman and the general dismissal of women in Irish history and women in the church as well. And I think part of the dismissal of women in the church from people outside of the church is because the church has done so much damage in our society. Within the church, women have always been dismissed, which that's always bothered me. That's part of the reason why I got into studying the early church in Ireland. But definitely to me, she would have been the Saint Brigid, and that's how I approached her. It was studying the saint and not what Brigid of, let's say, for example, the year 500, not about her, but of what was written about her in the year 675 kind of thing, So I was looking at generations after her, what Brigid meant to those people. But now she very much so is a woman of early medieval Ireland. To me, she now represents all of those women who are understudied and ignored and just written out of Irish history.
What do you think the bank holiday is going to do for Saint Brigid?
Well, I'm fascinated actually to see what the new public holiday will do because I don't know yet, so we've only had one day so far. And I think if you ask me that in 10 years' time, it'll be fascinating to see how it develops, because what happens when you have a day off school and work and everything is people find their own kind of new traditions and customs and how they note that day. So I'm going to be as interested in it as everyone else to see, and local communities. So I think it's going to be a really big deal in Kildare. Kildare are going to really capitalise on that. It's one of their people, one of their women that's being commemorated nationally. But kids around the country are going to be celebrating her because they've day off. So will that mean, to Patrick, to kids around the country means loads of sweets, that kind of, get in touch and we'll talk again.
Thank you so much. Sister Patricia Mulholland, what do you know about Saint Brigid?
Oh gosh, where to start, Celine? I mean, I grew up knowing about Saint Brigid as a child. My mother's name actually was Brigid. My grandmother was educated by Brigidine sisters in boarding school in Abbeyleix, and so were my aunts and my dad as well. And in the village where I grew up in Ballyroan, there was a Brigidine convent, and I went to school there at the age of 4. On the day I was 4, by the way, and my sister and my 2 brothers had been there before me.
And tell me more about the trafficking work that you're doing and St. Brigid and the relation there.
Oh gosh, yes, where to start?
Or can you discuss that?
Well, when I was listening to Niamh talking about the hagiography and the stories and the legends, in the work that I do, there are a lot of true stories that are similar, but without naming the names of those who are trafficked. It's a huge, terrible injustice to women. And, because it's with women that I'm in contact all the time. And they are forced into prostitution. A lot of them are domestic workers. They come to the country. I'm talking about the context of the UK now, but it's the same in other countries. They come on false promises. It's lies, it's deceit. They are promised they're going to have a job here, they're going to have a good life, and they're coming from poor areas, a lot of them. But some of them are coming also who are well educated, but they fall into the trap of actually thinking they're coming to improve their lives and to have better jobs. So in the years that I've been working, I first started to work in 2005 when our congregation took the initiative and at a chapter decided that this is the work that we were going to do. I was working for CAFOD at the time, which is equivalent to Troker in this country. And so I had experiences of being in other countries, particularly third world countries. And I knew the status of women in many of those countries. Something like what our speaker today, Niamh, has been talking about, the women of Ireland in the 5th, 6th, 7th century were, second-class citizens. It was a hierarchical and patriarchal church. But these women today are coming from these kind of situations as well, especially from the former communist countries, Eastern European countries. And they are the shackles of men. And some of them are married to these men who traffic them. Some of them, they're her boyfriends. Some of them are what we call the lover boys. You know, they fall in love with these men who promise them this, that, and the other. And then they find that the whole thing is based on lies, deceit, false promises. And, you know, and the lucky ones end up with us, where we can rehabilitate them. But it's a very hostile climate in the UK at the moment. Migrants, refugees, I don't know whether you have read anything in the newspapers, but unfortunately, the policies that are made are very anti-immigrant. And, you know, the irony of the situation is these policies are being made by people whose families were immigrants themselves. So it's astounding that this happens. So what can we do? And you're saying, how do I relate it to Brigid? Well, if Brigid were alive today, I'm sure she would be opening her doors, you know, to welcome the stranger, welcome those who are disadvantaged. Last year I was in Norway and I had written a poem a number of years ago on welcoming the stranger. There are no strangers. And there was a choir in Minnesota who got into contact with me, the organisers, and said, you know, we'd love to put this poem to music. And so they did. And they had the world premiere in Trondheim in Norway. And I was invited to be there. And it was such a powerful experience. But I was linking, you know, my experience of what I had heard as a child and grew up with in terms of Brigid of Kildare with, you know, welcoming the stranger. There are many other Brigidine sisters who are doing this too around the world. So we link up together because it was a policy, or it was something that we chose to do at one of our chapters. The chapter was in America at the time, and it was in 2003. And then I was invited, you know, to take up this work.
That's fantastic. You must feel really good that you're doing this as well.
I feel very humbled, actually. Because you take one step forward and three back, and you're dealing with broken human beings. And what can you do? You can't solve the problems. All you can do is be with the particular person who's with you. I teach them some English, and I also teach them computing. And they're like my nieces, you know, they're ordinary women who've gone through traumas. My nieces haven't gone through any of these traumas. Neither have I. I was privileged. I come from a privileged background in terms of education, in terms of care, in terms of love, in terms of, you know, very well looked after. I'm not talking about privilege in terms of great wealth or anything like that. I'm talking about the privileges of love and care and, you know, being well educated. So I look at the broken lives of the lovely young women who are in front of me, and I have no idea what they've gone through. I just know that it would be impossible for me to go through that and come out the other side smiling, I imagine. But you know, we try to rehabilitate them. We try to restore their dignity. Nobody takes away your dignity, but they can crush your dignity. They can destroy it, but they can't take it from you because it's an innate God-given gift. And so that's what we try to do, work we do. But it's a very humbling experience, very humbling. And, you know, I often weep for them because of what they're going through. I don't feel it is a privilege too. It's a privilege to be part of the life of somebody who's had a trauma, who's had such a terrible life. But it's also very humbling. Safe House, Bakita House, we've had 170 going through, and 13 babies born in the house. So I suppose, you know, it is something. But in the scheme of things, there are about 46 million people who are trafficked, displaced, migrants, refugees in the world. 46 million. And of those who are sexually exploited, about 80% are women and girls. At this moment, actually, between the ages of 5 and 15, there are 1 million children who are exploited around our world. 1 million. When you think of it in terms of the vastness. But it becomes too vast in a way. And I'm not a messiah. We can't solve the problems of the world. But you can meet one person and try to, touch the heart of one person and make them feel that they are loved and they are appreciated and they are somebody's. Saint Brigid was regarded as a woman who, the cross, of course, based on the cross of Jesus, but there's a special story attached to it that when she was making the cross with the chieftain, she was telling the story of Jesus on the cross and how Jesus, his life story and how he was executed for his values and for his beliefs. He was a revolutionary. In first century Palestine, an absolute revolutionary. And so was his mother, Mary. Her Magnificat, she said, he pulled down the mighty from their thrones, he exalted the lowly, he filled the hungry with good things. Wasn't that a cultural revolution? Wasn't that a financial revolution? Wasn't it also, in terms of the revolution of political? She was a very strong woman. She must have been involved in his life. Your mother and my mother were involved in our lives. They shaped our lives. Our fathers did as well, but our mothers particularly. We went to our mothers for advice, didn't we? And we looked to our mothers for love and care and whatever. Jesus would have been no different. His mother would have influenced him. Our founder, Daniel Delaney, he became the bishop. He was educated in France. He wanted to stay in France and have a nice life as a priest. His mother said to him, "Come back to Ireland. Look at the poverty in Ireland. Look at the lack of education. Come back to Ireland." Because his mother brought him back to Ireland. And as a result of what he saw in Ireland, he founded us. He refounded us, the ancient order of Saint Brigid. And he made it clear that he wasn't actually founding a new religious order. He was reviving the ancient order of Saint Brigid. But it was his mother who prompted him. So now Jesus would have been influenced by his mother hugely.
Thank you.
I've said it now.
Yeah. No, thank you so much. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
One of the things about Brigid that struck me is how little I actually know about her, and I grew up near the cathedral that she founded and I went to the nun school, but most people seem to know about her cloak and about St. Brigid's cross and that she was a saint. But there's so much more to her than that, and that's what I've discovered in this journey.
With Eva Ní. This year was the first year that Brigid had her own bank holiday. It was a long time coming. Last year was the first year ever. The Department of Foreign Affairs, they collaborated with the ITMA, which is the Irish Traditional Music Archive, and they commissioned 3 traditional Irish artists, Caitlín McGowan, Louise Mulcahy and Sheila Denver, to compose a piece kind of honouring Saint Brigid. So the piece that I looked into is called Saint Brigid's Day, and it was composed by Caitlín McGowan. I suppose this piece, it's a slip jig, and it really captures the theme of Saint Brigid. I play trad music, but only recently. So there's a tune and there's a dance. They're very well known, dedicated to St. Patrick. But only last year, the ITMA, Irish Traditional Music Archive, they realised that there wasn't actually anything dedicated to St. Brigid. There was a tune. There's 2 reels written by Father John Kelly. He was from Clare, so they were written around the 1970s, I think, and they're St. Brigid's reels. But that's all in trad Irish music that was dedicated to St. Brigid. There was nothing else, which was strange, considering how prominent she is in like kind of Irish tradition and folklore, and obviously even that tradition of the breed yoga. also play the concertina. So I remember when I heard this tune, it came out last year on Saint Brigid's Day. That's when ITMA released the 3 pieces. I remember hearing it and I was just like, this is just brilliant. I've been interested in Saint Brigid, and it was a surprise as well. I hadn't heard that this was being commissioned or anything or put together. So these 3 pieces just came out to honour Saint Brigid on Saint Brigid's Day. So that was really lovely, because I suppose obviously being involved in trad music, like, these pieces were a big deal. So then it was just, it was a nice little kind of build up nearly for, obviously this year Brigid got the proper recognition she deserves with bank holiday and everything. So I thought last year that those 3 commissioned pieces dedicated to her were a nice touch. In rural parts of Ireland, this tradition of the Brigid lives on. 1999 academic reading, The Festival of Brigid the Holy Woman, he describes the Brigid tradition as follows. Long ago, a peeled turnip was used to represent the head of the Brigid, which was draped like a baby being brought to the chapel to be baptised. The places for eyes, nose and mouth were cut out and coloured with soot or any other colouring available. A stick was inserted in the turnip to lend body to the Brigid and to make it easy to carry. And then Danaher's reading in 1972, titled The Year in Ireland, he describes the Brigid tradition as follows. Sometimes no effigy was carried, but a chosen girl dressed wholly or partly in white and carrying a finely made St. Brigid's cross of the local pattern impersonated the saint. Each participant of the Brigid prepared some item of entertainment to be performed on entering the houses. These items took the form of songs, music on flute or violin, and later accordion and rhymes, etc. My grandaunt, her name is Anne, is a nun, and her name is Sister Brigid, and she used to try and get me to join the convent unsuccessfully. But we made a compromise, and she gave me this little card. I always carry it in my wallet because I'm a proud Kildare woman. So it's just Saint Brigid, a lovely just artwork of her there, and then the metallic Brigid's cross, and a little prayer on the back which reads, Saint Brigid, you are a voice for the wounded and the weary. Strengthen what is weak within us. Calm us into a quietness that heals and listens. May we grow each day into greater wholeness in mind, body and spirit. Amen. So I think that really sums up how Brigid was just really, she's viewed as and has a legacy of a woman of compassion, a woman of creativity, and certainly a model of equality. Irish prayer to Saint Brigid. A read a bhur na mail, a read scuil harm the rat, agus cunnig fé de chuidach fé, go meg mé látiv lahas day.
I wanted to find out about Brigid, the patron saint of Ale. I'm sitting here in Boyle's pub in Kildare with Judith Boyle.
Hi, my name is Judith Boyle, and as Celine said, we're here in Boyle's pub. We're a family-run pub that we have been here for nearly 80 years now, so we're 3rd generation in this premises, and I'm a 5th generation.
So tell me a little bit about the St. Brigid's Ale, or is it Brigid's Ale?
Brigid's Ale, we call it. What kind of happened with Brigid's Ale was we were part of the Féile Bride festival in general, and the Brigidine nuns asked us to do a tasting because Brigid is the patron saint of brewing in Ireland, which lots of people don't know about. And she was also really adventurous in relation to making sure that what they used in the land was also used for the people. So beer is one of those things. It used to be called liquid bread because you could make beer, it would last longer, and you'd still have all the nutrients that you would have in the barley. We a little bit less alcohol than we have now, which was always good. Yeah, so we used to do a beer tasting and then pair it with some local food. And we were having a conversation and was like, well, if Brigid is the patron saint of beer, wouldn't it be lovely to produce a beer that was kind of in her honour or in her ethos more than anything else? So we decided, along with a home brewer, to develop a recipe. And we developed the recipe. My dad's a beekeeper, so Brigid was also a beekeeper. So we decided that we would put my dad's honey into the beer, myself and my sister, and we then wanted to keep it kind of traditional Irish. So it's technically a red ale or a braggot, which was a mixture of a honey or a mead or a honey beer and a mead with an ordinary beer. So we're using honey in it, and then we brewed it with some kind of generic earthy hops to bring out kind of the earthy elements to it. And that is how we got the recipe for Brigid's Ale. And then we did a homebrew batch and trialed it, and then everybody liked it. And I thought, that's the end of it. And then people kept asking us for it. So we brewed it commercially, or Cuckoo brewed it commercially in a brewery. And that was the history of it, or how it began. The Brigidine nuns in Kildare have been a really good support of us. They had a twinning about a year and a half ago, and it must be longer now because of COVID. My brain has forgotten. But yeah, they had a twinning event, and we served the beer at it. And we also served some Irish fruit wine that's made from a company in Wicklow called Monair. And yeah, and everybody loved it there too. So yeah, no, they've been a really good support in relation to it. And it keeps kind of the ethos of Brigid and what she was. I always think that Brigid, as either a saint or a goddess, or even just her identity as a whole, is a really good feminine figure, because she was proactive in what she was doing. She really believed in educating both men and women, which I think is a really important thing. And it was a case that, yeah, it was said that she thought that if she brewed a lake of beer, it would solve the world's problems. But no, she ever got to it.
I'm Dr Niamh Wycherley. I'm a medieval historian in the Department of Early Irish in Maynooth University.
I have a couple of questions for you, because I grew up in Newbridge and the nuns always taught us about Saint Brigid, but at the end of the day, I really only know about her cloak, and I know about Saint Brigid's cross. As an early medieval historian, what would you say to people who don't know much about Saint Brigid?
Well, it's funny because the same stories are still being repeated to schoolgirls and boys today, that the strongest kind of images we associate with Brigid are the cloak and the cross. And the church, for some reason at some point, I haven't actually traced the kind of more modern and early modern history of stories about Brigid, but at some point they decided on what their firm narrative was kind of repeat. And I think that's understandable, because you can't, Brigid and most early historical topics are very complex. And especially when you're teaching primary school children, you have to simplify it down to its core. So they focus on a couple of key stories about Brigid, and they just repeat them ad nauseum, which is fine. There's no issues with the particular stories about Brigid that are put out there. But I think you highlighted something important there, and that is it's actually very difficult if you were someone who wants to find out more about Brigid. So if you want to go a little bit deeper into the real historical evidence about her. So I am a specialist in the area of the early Irish church in particular. So Brigid falls very firmly within that whole world that I kind of inhabit in my work life. And while we don't have a lot of very firm historical facts about Brigid, we don't for anyone really from that time period. She's not unique in that regard. What we do have is a lot of stories and information about her coming up kind of 100 perhaps years after she lived. And that is what forms the basis for my understanding of the historical Brigid.
Is there a relationship between Saint Brigid and spring?
I don't know if there ever was originally, to be honest. This is something that I have been looking into more, because it's something that has cropped up since the new public holiday and people talking about all the different aspects of Brigid. What is the relation between Imbolg and the kind of the celebration of the start of spring, and with St. Brigid's feast day of the 1st of February? As far as I can gather, I think that association was fabricated, and it was probably fabricated by a author and cleric called Cogitosus in the kind of middle to late 600s. And he may have done so because one of the main things that Cogitosus is doing is glorifying Kildare. So not just Brigid, but also Kildare. And he describes all the crowds of people that were coming to Kildare. And he says, Kildare was so important that it attracted loads of people, but that they were coming to Kildare to venerate Brigid, to venerate the tomb of Brigid, and to glorify Brigid as founder of Kildare. Now, what may have been happening here was certainly Brigid was very famous in this period. At this stage, people would most certainly have been going to Kildare to see her tomb and to pray at her tomb and to seek, look for miracles and interventions. However, what was probably also happening was that there were people coming to Kildare like a kind of a market day at the start of spring, that they were all gathering from the countryside to Kildare. They wouldn't have gathered in towns very often. I say towns, I shouldn't say towns. There were no towns in Ireland at this time. I keep on picturing modern Kildare, but really at the time it would have just been a kind of a large church site. And people would have gathered there on kind of important, as I said, kind of market days, different kind of days that you would have had kind of political activity going on. You would have had economic activity, exchange and trade, and people taking the opportunity to kind of catch up with other people in various forms, whether that's kind of informal or formal. This would have happened kind of around the church site as kind of somewhere that was centre of a community. Now, what might have been happening was that people were gathering in Kildare at the start of spring, and Cogitosus decided to capitalise on this and say, well, they're all coming to see Brigid, and because her feast day is the 1st of February. I think that's the most likely theory. I've done a good bit of research on it. We'll never be able to tell for certain, but that's where I think it's coming from. I think that he intentionally associated Brigid with that important day where people were gathering anyway.
Do you know why Saint Brigid chose Kildare for the monastery and for the church in Roundtower?
I suppose it was because that's the area where she was from. It was the area where she could get a grant of land, where she was given permission to build a church, practical reasons. She's definitely, all the early sources agree that she is from a people called the Fahart, who were from the area around kind of what is now more so kind of Offaly, but also Kildare, and encompassing the modern diocese of Kildare. Now, Kildare town is currently situated at the extremes of what this area of the Fahart would have been, but still within its boundaries. Evidence has her, so she's from the Fahart were kind of a larger family group. Within that family group, her specific family, the early sources say, was from this kind of area in Offaly, kind of around Croghan Hill. But anyway, as I said, the larger area of this group that she was part of, this dynastic group, encompassed the area of modern town of Kildare. So how things worked in how the church was established in early Ireland was usually an individual, not always though, like Patrick is an obvious example. I was going to say usually the person already had important familial and political maybe connections with the person who gives them the grant of land. So in Brigid's case, it could have been, for example, her father, her brother, her uncle, some kind of male relative who owned the land, who gave the land to her, not necessarily out of Christian faith or charity, but perhaps because, and again, I'm just hypothesizing here, but perhaps because the church was becoming established in the country and this was their own part in this grander scheme. They had a woman of the family who was devout and who was motivated and who wanted to found a church, so they gave her that piece of land. But we do have examples of people like Patrick, who had no familial associations in Ireland, who had no connections, and it was a hard place to function in if you didn't have any connections. Some say it's a hard place to function in now if you don't have any connections. But he managed to convince, through the force of his personality, his charisma, the simple message of Christ, which we well know is a very powerful message. It's been very successful around the world for 2,000 years. He managed to convince kings around the Irish countryside to let him preach in their jurisdiction, but also some of them gave him permission to found churches and to ordain priests and that kind of thing. So Patrick is a good example of someone who functioned without any, hereditary associations with the place.
Do you have any insight into the traditions behind the Saint Brigid cross making?
I don't actually. It's an early modern. That's the one thing I did. I looked into it as far as to see if there are any early medieval references to it, because I am very interested in the cross myself, but I couldn't find any medieval references to it. So it's an early modern. This is the really interesting thing about Brigid, and part of the reason why in 2023 we have so many different voices shouting about Brigid. Unlike nearly every other Christian saint in the world, Brigid's cult was reformulated the whole time throughout history. So the early modern, in the early modern period in Ireland, new stories about Brigid were being commissioned and composed and everything, and they then influenced the different practices and traditions that we enjoy now.
Do you know what the significance of Saint Brigid's Well is? How that came about or anything about that?
Well, I don't know a lot specifically about Saint Brigid's Well. It's not something that comes to the fore in a lot of the earliest stories of Brigid. However, wells were really, they were inextricably linked with Christianization in Ireland. And we do have this, for example, one famous story written around the same time as the early stories of Brigid, but written about Patrick by a contemporary of Cogitosus. His name was Tyrchon, and he gives us an explicit description of how Patrick Christianized a local well, how this was already a place, of devotion, and that he made it a Christian place. So that is something that's relatively common throughout this kind of early medieval period.
Most people have heard the legendary story about Saint Brigid's cloak covering over the curragh, which we talked about. But do you know anything about Saint Brigid hanging her cloak on a rainbow? And are they related or are they separate stories?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, actually, the story of Brigid, it's her hanging her cloak on a sunbeam rather than a rainbow, even though there could have been a rainbow there, because the story is all about the rain and the sun came out. That's actually a story in Cogitosus, so it's one of our earliest stories about Brigid. So he describes this whole episode where Brigid comes in wearing her cloak. Does actually feature the whole time, no matter what period you look at Brigid. And as I said, the earliest stories, her cloak is mentioned a lot. So anyway, he says that she came in. Now, this is kind of standard. He gives all these kind of different 32 little stories about Brigid. He says he picked them he had loads more stories, but he wanted to keep his text brief. She came in from the rain and she hung up her cloak on what she thought was a tree branch, and everyone around her kind of gasped and was amazed, and she was like, why is everyone giving me attention? I didn't do anything strange. I'm just hanging it up to dry because it's all wet. And they were marveling because it wasn't a tree branch that she hung her cloak on. It was actually a sunbeam. And he says, and this is just another example of how marvelous this woman was.
How would you relate the historical person Saint Brigid to a multicultural Irish society today?
Good question. I mean, there's so much in that. I think one of the strong narratives about Brigid that is coming out, and in fairness has always been, was to the fore in the early lives of Brigid as well, is her as a woman and kind of representing that jurisdiction, which was definitely very underrepresented in the medieval period, but still shockingly is today in 2023. So I do think it's really important that we have, we hold up kind of some, woman heroes, kind of for want of a better phrase. So I think that's important. In terms of multiculturalism, I think, again, the fact that she appeals to lots of different constituencies means that she's not like other famous historical figures or even famous fictional figures, where she is very definitively kind of known and described as, people get very upset at the moment. They're upset about the depiction of Cleopatra in a new, a new series that she's being portrayed as black, and people are saying that she was Greek, she wouldn't have been black, that kind of thing. I don't think you can get that with Brigid, because she was described in so many different ways over the centuries that she can appeal to any different kind of constituency now, and she isn't as typecast. The one thing I do think is the whole sex gender side of things, where in the early sources she is very intentionally depicted as having all of the best attributes of men and women, and that she was not hamstrung by gender like other people were. So in the time, so women especially were, but men also were, their lives were very dictated by sex and gender, in that, you know, women's lives were stereotyped by the fact that they could their reproductive abilities. Okay, so that was really important to your family and to your wider kin group. You were supposed to bear children, right? So for a woman to decide to go into the church and therefore to deny kind of the one defining characteristic she had, which was to bear children, that you were kind of turning the whole thing on its head. And we do see this in a lot of stories about female saints in general, that they became more powerful because they weren't being hamstrung by those tight kind of narrow confines. So therefore, because she didn't have to, she was then kind of sexless, she was genderless, and you have the kind of thing going on. Some kind of scholars have called it, you know, like a third gender or genderless or whatever when it comes to saints. Okay, because they're not sexual beings, therefore they're sexless equals genderless. Okay, so they're kind of, they're very clear that sex and gender are totally different things in the medieval texts. And Brigid derives power from the fact that she isn't a part of this kind of expected norms of women in that society. So I think that's a really powerful message as well. And that she can, you know, kind of appeal to kind of, as I said, kind of transcend these kind of issues of sex and gender as well.
What would Saint Brigid be like in today's contemporary world? Would she be different, or would she find it harder?
So I think she would be doing the same things. Okay, so she would, so the kind of the new thing in the world of her time, let's say in 6th century, you know, 5th and 6th century Ireland, the new thing was the church, and she was an integral part of that in Ireland. She also clearly was someone who was confident, who was a trailblazer, who wasn't afraid to put her head above the parapet. So I think all of those things she would have still been today, and she would have been part of, I mean, there's a question here of whether she was, how devout she genuinely was, or were there political motives as well? And I don't know. We're not ever going to be able to prove that. So today, would she have been leading some kind of, you know, big new innovative company focusing on climate change and sustainability and, you know, preserving our future? Or would she have been a bit more kind of politically minded and, you know, the founder of a big tech or social media company, you know? So, but I do think she would have definitely been an influencer.
Especially for women too, right?
Yeah, definitely. That's what I'm saying. It was really hard to function in Ireland at that time as a woman, and it still is today, but it is definitely easier today because we do not have, technically the law says that we are all equal. The law in early medieval Ireland said that women were not equal explicitly, so they had no institutional or legal support in what they were doing. Now, I know today women still find it very hard to get their foot in the door in places, but technically you can't discriminate against women and so-called other minorities, whereas you could explicitly do that in the period that Brigid was functioning in. So therefore, it just, you know, goes to show that what she was doing was very difficult and very worthy, and she was championing women, and especially what is crucial is the women that came after her, you know, that they too were continuing on this legacy, and that they, like the Abbess of Kildare at any given time, was the most powerful woman in the country. So she left just an incredible legacy for women in Ireland.
So is there any surviving art from when Brigid existed in medieval times?
So what we have, so the art that survives really, it comes in the form of, the earliest art actually is usually metal work, okay, ecclesiastical artifacts, like chalices, that kind of thing. So the different decoration on them is actually some of our earliest art actually is on metal things. So there would have been sculpture and stuff as well, but most of our sculpture actually survives from a later period. I don't know, is it because of weathering and that kind of thing that they doesn't survive from the period, the very earliest time. So let's say from the 7th century. So the high crosses and everything are usually the earliest high crosses. High crosses are another 200 years after that. That's not to say that there wouldn't have been sculpture at the time, but it just doesn't survive. Then, of course, we have illuminated manuscripts as well. But again, our most famous is the Book of Kells from around the year 800, whereas we have metal artifacts surviving from earlier. The earliest manuscripts actually do survive from, let's say 150 years and perhaps even 200 years before the Book of Kells, but they're not artistic artifacts, they're not highly illuminated. So I would say our earliest art really survives in the form of this decoration of these ecclesiastical artifacts. But most of the art surviving from this whole period, actually like the whole way up, really if you think about it, for centuries, it's all religious art or religious artifacts. And that is because the money and the patronage came into and through the church. So it's within these ecclesiastical institutions and within these monasteries that they're actually producing.
Can Ireland improve Brigid's iconic recognition through school and media platforms?
Yes, definitely. Already, Brigid attracts a lot of attention in school and media platforms. However, as you pointed out at the start, it's a very simplistic message, unnecessarily simplistic in a lot of ways. So, of course, it's going to be really interesting to see now. I think with the new public holiday, it's going to stimulate more creative interest. So we are going to see a renewed interest in Brigid and perhaps a reframing of the narrative around her. So not just a focus on the three or, the kind of the two simple things of the cloak and the cross, but even to see maybe a reimagining of the cloak and the cross and what they mean. And how people celebrate the public holiday going forward will be interesting. And I think media and schools will play a huge part of that. I would love to see the primary school curriculum. It's actually okay. It does develop. I read through the whole curriculum and it's quite interesting for 5th and 6th class school children. It asks pupils to kind of interrogate why these stories of Brigid, were written and stuff. So that's quite good. But there are a few things that are oversimplified and I think it would, this iconic status that you talk of, I think showing all the complexity of Brigid and from my perspective, appreciating what the actual real flesh and blood woman did on the ground. That to me is a really inspirational and iconic story. So that's what I want to promote. But that doesn't have to be, exclusive of, to exclude all the other kind of interpretations of Brigid.
Do you think a saint on a public holiday is a good idea in a multicultural Ireland?
Yes, definitely, because I think what multiculturalism, good multiculturalism shows us is that we need to learn more about what other people believe in, and not say nobody believes in anything, right? So acknowledge that these are the beliefs and teach children and teach people that this is what certain people believe in, this is what other people believe in, and let's bring it all together. But, just trying to, wash over everything actually ends up just being to the benefit of the dominant voice anyway. So I don't think there's anything wrong with a saint being the inspiration for a new public holiday. But I think you do that in tandem with understanding what a saint meant, then what a saint means now. Let's have a conversation about it. Don't just say, this is this one static image and we're not going to question it, but understand what it means to you. And I think when people do that, then they go, oh, actually, that's quite similar to what I grew up being taught, or what I grew up, even though I was from a different culture. And I think bringing in different cultures into that. But as I said, just trying to learn more about what that actually meant. Again, it's when you simplify the message. I do think, though, the reason why Brigid was chosen for the new public holiday wasn't the Saint Brigid necessarily. I think the Saint Brigid is why the saintliness of her is why Brigid is famous. But I think now the reason why, she has such longevity is because there are other parts of her. So the goddess Brigid, or, the feminist Brigid, or, the hero Brigid, or whatever. And I actually think that's the reason why she's so appealing in 2023, is that you can commemorate Brigid without believing, certainly, in saints, but without even acknowledging the saint side of things. There's an important lesson to be learned today about Brigid and medieval Irish history, that we have to stop romanticising Brigid and, as I said, medieval Ireland in general. You often heard it referred to as Celtic Ireland, or even you have Celtic mysticism, or Celtic song, or Celtic religion, Celtic church. None of these things existed. You do have, I suppose, Irish art from the period, and that kind of thing. But the word Celtic implies that there was some kind of homogenous culture and society, which there wasn't. So you hear description of a Celtic woman. What was a Celtic woman? Women were different from different areas and from different centuries. So the problem with romanticizing this time period and this place is that it's been co-opted in other jurisdictions, less so yet in Ireland, by kind of far right and, almost fascist groups that see that there was a glorious time in the past that we need to recreate today, that we should be emulating. And really, what they're getting at is that there was a time when white people dominated in the area. And so that in Celtic Ireland, it was this homogenous white society, and that there's no room for the multiculturalism that you see today in modern Ireland. But when you hear this as a medieval historian, it's perplexing, because medieval Ireland was multicultural and diverse. There was lots of different types of people of different races, different backgrounds, and it does a disservice to the history to whitewash the whole thing. However, it's dangerous for our present and our future to whitewash the history, because you're erasing the stories of anyone that these people count as other or as not part of that story. So we have to include all the different voices today, but also they were a part of our medieval Irish history as well. So I think that's something that's really important to bear in mind.
Before we close the conversation, would you like to add anything else?
I think I've probably covered a lot of it there. The only thing I would just reiterate again is that there are, even in history, in my area of expertise of kind of the early Irish church or medieval Irish history, there are, lots of different scholars have written on different aspects of the veneration of Brigid, of what we know about Brigid historically, of the cult of Brigid, of Saint Brigid, of all of that. However, the one thing that has been lost, and the more I've actually read into this, the more I do think it's just a kind of maybe a lazy kind of patriarchal kind of approach to Brigid, maybe a kind of a unintentional misogyny has just seeped through the scholarly studies of Brigid, where people so very learned people have even dismissed the existence of Brigid at all. And a lot of people do that in a way where they say she was just made up by the church to replace an existing pagan goddess. And that, to me, gets me upset, to put it mildly, that it's just that so a woman, you just can't appreciate her achievements or what they were, her achievements are so incontrovertible that, you know, you've gone so far as to propose that she didn't even exist at all, that she could only have left such an incredible legacy if she was a made-up fiction. And that is dangerous. That is something that we can't perpetuate in 2023. You know, scholars were writing this, you know, maybe decades ago, but for me as a scholar, I think it's really important to put the message out there in 2023 that those arguments were framed in a different time, different cultural norms, and it's not acceptable now to just accept the dismissal of the real woman's achievements. As I said, that, oh, well, a real woman couldn't possibly have achieved all of this. She must have been made up by a man. So that's the one thing I'd like to just kind of put out there.
That was brilliant. Thank you so much, Dr. Niamh Wycherley.
Thank you for having me.
This podcast was produced, edited and hosted by myself, Celine O'Sullivan. Special thanks to Ballyfermot College of Further Education, Stephen Murphy, Caroline McKenna, Christine Moynihan and Pat Daly, Dublin City University, Maynooth University, St Brigid's Cathedral and Round Tower, Kildare Heritage Centre and Boyles Public House, Dr Niamh Wycherley, the music from Mairead MacMullan, Luka Bloom, Caitlín Gabhann, AI prompts from Kevin Gallegly and graphic artist Melissa Conowal. And of course, I couldn't have done this without Saint Brigid. Everyone else who supported me, thank you very much.
Yes, we've broken our bones. We've given our essence to bottomless gold.